And welcome back, UCF fans, to our opponent previews for the 2024 football season. I'm Chris Boyle from the Daytona Beach News Journal, and today we are looking at the Arizona State Sun Devils, one of the four newcomers to the Big 12, and we're joined by Michelle Gardner of the Arizona Republic. Michelle, how are you?
I'm doing great. Looking forward to the season.
Same here, and then the workload that comes along with the next 4.5 months, right?
Absolutely.
Well, we want to ask about Arizona State. They unfortunately drew the short straw. They are picked last to finish in the Big 12 at the preseason media poll. That didn't matter to West Virginia one bit. In fact, they were motivated enough to win 9 games and dump mayonnaise on Neil Brown's head last year. So what was the reaction from the Sun Devils, their players, their coaches about that upon seeing it? And how do you feel like they can also use it as fuel?
They take it with a grain of salt. Kenny Dillingham said, hey, who else are they going to pick? We were 3-9 the last 2 years. The quarterback situation's a little bit unstable. Nobody knows who the quarterback's going to be. A lot of people that voted in this poll probably didn't see a lot of Arizona State last year, them not being in the Big 12, and a lot of games on the West Coast. Who from the East Coast that voted was even up watching them. So he said he gets it. And I think it's definitely fuel for the fire. They're going to probably have that taped in their team room and look at it every day. So I kind of wrote a column kiddingly saying people shouldn't be insulted. They should be thankful because that's the perfect incentive.
Yeah, I mentioned it worked for West Virginia last year. Do you feel like it's a fair ranking? Do you feel like it's fair on Arizona State to be at the bottom of the Big 12, or do you feel like people are overlooking them?
I understand it. I don't think they're going to be the last place team when it's all said and done. I think they could maybe finish 9th, maybe. I think they can finish 500. I think 500 is a legitimate goal. They really should have finished 500 last year. They were 3-9. But they had 3 games they really should have won. And one of those was Washington, of all teams. They had Washington beat until throwing a pick 6 in the 4th quarter. So I think they could finish 500. I don't think they'll finish last, but who knows?
Well, part of the reason I think, I'm not for myself, but part of the reason I think that they are getting overlooked a little bit is the schedule. The schedule for Arizona State shapes up as one of the toughest in the conference and one of the tougher ones in the country. You look at even in the non-conference schedule, they got Wyoming, Mississippi State, and Texas State. And I think those are 3 tricky games. So how are they kind of bracing for this? And, what do you think about the overhaul, the way things shape up for them?
Very difficult schedule. Wyoming is tough. I mean, that's usually you schedule a couple of, pretty easy games for the non-conference. But I think it is a tough schedule. Going to Kansas State in November is no picnic. They're going to Stillwater, and they're going to be in Stillwater on homecoming, which is no joke at that school. So very, very difficult schedule. They're going to know what they're made of right away.
To your point, Wyoming beat Texas Tech last year to open the season. Their first 3 games, by the way, the Sun Devils in conference play at Texas Tech, which is, again, no fun, Kansas at home, and Utah at home. So they're going to get tested right out of the gate, and they'll see exactly what their work, what they can do. Kenny Dillingham, you talked about him a little bit. This is his 2nd year as the head coach. He was a former position coach and assistant coach under Gus Malzahn. Tell us a little bit about Kenny, the person, and in what ways do you think he's similar with his mentor, Gus Malzahn?
Well, I don't know that much about Gus Malzahn, but Kenny's talked about him quite a bit. The one thing about Kenny, I think him being, so he is the youngest head coach at 34 years old, hired when he was 32. I think he relates to the kids because he's not that far removed from his playing age, So I think they identify with him, and I think he's got a vibe and an energy and a passion that's contagious. I've never seen anything like it. And I think it was a good hire at the time, too, because with the NCAA investigation going on when they were trying to hire a coach, what kind of pool of applicants are you really going to get? You get a local guy that is from here, went to the school, so he's invested, has an interest in getting this school back where it should be. I think it was the perfect hire. And he's just a lot of fun. You never know what you're going to get from him. but he doesn't make any excuses when they had the injuries last year. His famous line was, "Nobody's going to feel sorry for us." So I think he's a fantastic hire, and I think it's going to take some time, but I think they've got potential to finish 500 this year.
You mentioned like some of the other factors, right? The injuries that they encountered last year, the investigation before his hire. Do you feel like there's any like immediate pressure on him in year two to really get results, or is there going to be more patience given, considering that he does have so much investment into the program?
There's no pressure at all. I mean, he still is dealing with sanctions from the previous regime, and I don't think you can really judge a guy until he can coach sanction free. I mean, they still had this year, I think it was 4 weeks they're not allowed to contact recruits. They still have a limit in scholarships. So I think that the fan base gets it and the fan base knows. That doesn't mean that they're patient, but I think they get it. So I don't think he's on the hot seat at all. I think you've got to wait and see how things turn this year. And if the team shows some improvement, I think that the fan base will be happy with that.
Let's move to the quarterback room. There's been quite a lot of change in that particular department. Jaden Rashada's gone. Drew Pine is gone. In comes Sam Levitt from Michigan State and Jeff Sims, who UCF saw and beat twice when he was at Georgia Tech. He was at Nebraska last year. What's the temperature of the room right now? Do you have a sense of who's going to be the starter, or is there still going to be just a wide open competition by the time the fall kicks in?
My guess is it's going to be Levitt. He was definitely the best in the spring. I think that he has more of the intangibles. The guy that everybody loves here is Trenton Bourguet, who's kind of the veteran. He's a 6-year senior. He doesn't have the greatest arm strength, and I think they've got a talented wide receiving core. So they need somebody that can air out the ball and get the ball downfield, and I think that is Levitt. One thing about Bourguet is he's also the consummate team guy. He played last year battered, bruised, behind a bad offensive line. And this is a kid that gave $10,000 his own NIL money to the Sun Devil collectives because he wanted to try and get the good players to stay. So he's a consummate team guy, but I don't think he's the best quarterback per se. I think with Sims, I think he was brought in as depth. You can't have a quarterback room with literally 2 scholarship players. I think Sims has got the reputation for turning the ball over. You never like that. Obviously, he's athletically gifted, but I would be very surprised if come opening day, Sam Levitt was not the starter.
And then one other thing that stood out to me when researching Arizona State, the disparity in the fourth quarter. They were outscored 112-57, which, given the fact they were 3-9, probably doesn't sound like much of a surprise. But as you alluded to earlier, there were lots of reasons for that. Can you give us a sense of, what their struggles were in the fourth quarter of games last season and how they're planning to improve in that department?
They were just worn out. When you look at this team, they had 31 players injured last year, and those players missed a total of 143 games. And most of these injuries weren't, 1 week or 2 weeks. 16, 17 of those injuries were guys that missed 5 weeks or more. And then when you look at the positions of injury problems, it was the offensive line more than anything else. 9 offensive linemen were injured last year and missed time. One of their starters broke his leg literally in the second game of the season. So it was just mass chaos up there. So if you don't have an offensive line, you can't run block, you can't pass protect, and just overall injuries, you're worn down because you're relying on guys to play 60, 70 snaps. In some cases, guys played 80 snaps. They had a center in Lee Fotanu who literally played every snap last year. So I just think it was a matter of just the injuries and getting worn down and running out of gas.
November's a long time from when we're recording this. It's, almost the last week of July when we're doing this, but UCF does go to Tempe. It'll be their first trip out there. What's kind of your overall sense of what you think this game will look like? How do you feel like Arizona State will match up with UCF?
I think it'll be a good game. I mean, UCF wasn't exactly picked to finish at top of the heap either. So we'll see how teams, pan out before then. But I think it should be, if you look, just at stats and players, I think it'll be a good game. ASU, the good thing about them is they have more depth at every position than they did last year. I think tight end might be the only position they don't have the depth that they did last year. I think that's a question mark along with the quarterback. But ASU's got very strong wide receivers, and they've got a very, very strong secondary. So depending on how UCF matches up their defensive backs and their, against ASU's wide receivers and vice versa, I think that might go a long way in determining who wins this game.
Yeah, I don't know Arizona State as well as some of the other teams. I'll be, the first to put my hand up and say that East Coast bias probably got the best of me last year when we were working on deadlines here for games that kick off, 7, 8 o'clock at night, and Arizona State's playing well into the wee hours of the morning on occasion. But I'll tell you what, I do think this will be a better team. I believe West Virginia was better than what they were ranked last year. I kind of feel the same way about Arizona State. And both teams are going to see this game, I think, as one of those games on the schedule that's winnable, right? Like, if for Arizona State defending home against a team that, doesn't have the greatest of expectations, that's not projected to be, right at the top of the league, I think they'll certainly like their chances. And likewise, UCF is going to see this opportunity as a game on the road against a team that doesn't have the most intimidating road environment, and an opportunity to get one in the bag away from home, which has been a sore spot under Gus Malzahn so far.
Here's one thing, though. The one thing you guys do have in your favor, you're not going to be here in September when it's 118.
You know what? The funny thing about that is like it's 118 there, but I'll tell you what, having lived in Florida my entire life, 95 with the humidity rating here, it probably feels worse.
I agree. As a native Floridian, I can absolutely agree.
Although, what's interesting, I did talk to RJ Harvey recently, and he said that it felt hotter in Vegas for Media Day than anything he'd experienced here. So perhaps you're onto something there, even with the dry heat. Michelle, where can people find you on Twitter or X or whatever we're going to call it, and where can they find your?
I'm at M Gardner Sports, and I'm also on Instagram. And our website is azcentral.com. And I'm at every practice. I'm in training camp, and I even get to go on the road. So I'm actually kind of looking forward to seeing some of these Big 12 venues. And obviously ASU doesn't play Central Florida at Central Florida this year, but I can't wait to go there just because I've got friends in the area, and I've lived in Florida much of my life. So I like that I'm going to get to see them.
One of the great things about being in the USA Today network is you get to read a lot of different college sports writers. There's a lot of investment being put into college football. There's nobody better on Arizona State than Michelle. So make sure to give her a follow. UCF fans, at Chris Boyle DBNJ is where you'll find me. news-journalonline.com. We'll have you fully covered all the way through the season. Thanks so much, Michelle.
Anytime.